this is Charlene Sando, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Southern Gal's Kitchen. We're going to be making some discard sourdough biscuits. You know, we all have a lot of discard if we do sourdough, and you need recipes to use them. This is a really good way to use your discard, and we're going to be doing it with some ancient grains. So hang on, we'll be back in a minute. To make these biscuits, I'm going to use white spelt, and I'll talk about that, and all-purpose Einkorn. Now, all-purpose Einkorn, if I buy it, and this is bought because that's what most people have, it is, the kind I get is 20% of the bran and germ taken out. So it still has a lot of nutrition. Einkorn has magnesium, potassium, iron, vitamin E. It just has so many nutrients. You know, our bodies, we need more nutrition. We're not getting enough good nutrition in our diet. And I know I'm like a lot of people. I don't like to eat a lot of grains because I get too many carbs, just like most of us. But when I eat grains, I often will use something like Einkorn or spelt, even if I use the all-purpose, because it's much easier for me to digest, and most people say that. A lot of us, our modern wheat has way too much gluten in it. It's really hard on your digestive system, and it can make my stomach hurt, and there's millions of people out there just like me. This is not gluten-free, but it's a weaker gluten. Now you can grind your Einkorn. I often do that, and I've had videos where I do that. You grind your own, you can sift out some of the bran. If you use just the Einkorn by itself, whole grain, nothing sifted out, they're going to be pretty dense biscuits. You can do that, but they're going to be pretty dense. I've got sifters that I have. This is a 40 mesh, this is a 50. This will pretty much make all-purpose flour, and really this one's pretty close. You can take that, if you mill your own grain, you sift it, and you can use hand sifters, but if you use a little hand sifter like a mesh, you won't get a lot out unless you sift it 4 or 5 times, maybe 6 or 7, because you don't get much out. With this, you can sift one time and then you're finished. So if you want to grind your own, and I do, I almost always grind my own flour. But again, I wanted to do this recipe in a way that most people would be doing it, and that's with the bought Einkorn all-purpose flour. It's going to make a lighter, tender, fluffy biscuit. Now the spelt is another ancient grain. It's easier to digest. It's full of nutrition if you use the whole grain. This is white spelt though, and white spelt has pretty much everything taken out of it. So you're not getting the nutrition that you would in a whole grain spelt. You can substitute, this is a 1 1/4 cups. You could use 3/4 cup of the white spelt, 3/4 cup of the whole grain spelt to add some nutrition back in there. And I often like to do that, and I often will do that. Again, I'm trying to make these as simple for people to make. I'm going to do some other biscuit recipes where I do more whole grain. You can also substitute half of this with whole wheat flour. But again, if you use too much whole wheat, too much whole grain spelt, too much whole grain Einkorn, you're going to have a really dense biscuit. If you're okay with that, then you can do that. And if you bake them too long, they're going to be hard as a brick. So I'd be really cautious. At best, I would just use 3/4 cup of whole grain spelt in here with my discard. I have a recipe in my cookbook, and I use some white spelt. White spelt again means everything's taken out, but it makes a fluffy. It's like an all-purpose flour. It's an ancient grain. It's easier to digest. But the whole grain spelt, I sift it with a hand sifter, not with these fine mesh, because that takes a lot of it out, or half of it anyway, probably. But the mesh one's hand sifter, I'll sift it 3 or 4 times, and that just takes out a little bit of the bran. Those make really good biscuits too, and I may make those one day. They're not a sourdough. These are a sourdough discard. I do have sourdough, as a lot of us do, and you got to do something with that discard. I don't like to throw it away. It's too good in recipes. You make good chocolate cake, you make good muffins, wonderful pancakes, and we'll be doing some more discard recipes because I do discard like most of you do. So we've got a 1 1/4 cups of white spelt, 1 1/4 cups of all-purpose Einkorn, we have 1 1/4 cups of buttermilk. I used almond milk and put a little bit of vinegar in it. I've got a tablespoon of baking soda. You're going to mix up the salt, baking soda, and flours together so you can get all that baking soda mixed in. So we got our flours in here. We got a tablespoon of baking powder, and we have a half teaspoon of, I use sea salt, and most of you know I grind my own, but that's up to you. And I like to sift those together with a whisk because you don't want to get a biscuit with a big clump of baking powder in it. It would be too good. So you want to really mix these well. And then we have 4 tablespoons of butter that I have cut up into little slabs. I'll show you that. Just little thin slabs. And then I put them in the freezer. You want them really cold. I took them out, I don't know, maybe 2 minutes ago. Because you want them really, really cold. Keep them in there as long as you can. So you want to mix these. We're going to mix our buttermilk with our 1/4 cup of sourdough discard. Now your sourdough discard can be room temperature. It can come right out of the refrigerator. It does not have to be bubbly and rising and all that. This was not bubbly. I just took it out and I did let it set out because I was doing some other things. But you can just use it straight. It's okay. And then we'll stir that up good. Once we get that stirred up well, we're going to add it right into our dry ingredients. Well, take that back. We're going to add our butter first. I just forgot to add the butter in there. We're going to add the butter. You want to coat that butter in flour. I'm going to show you how to do that. If you want really flaky biscuits, you do this just like I do my pie dough. You don't want to just start mixing. You can use one of those pastry blenders. You can do different things. You can use 2 forks. But I like to just do it with my hands. And this butter is a little bit really hard because it's been in the freezer. But you want to mash it out. Your finger just kind of mash down on each piece a little bit. And what you're doing is you're going to coat these in flour. You want to coat every one of them in flour really well. You don't want to break them down to pieces where there's nothing left. You don't want them soft because that soft will just make greasy biscuits. It won't make fluffy, tender biscuits. You want, just like pie dough, you want to break this down, kind of mash it, smear it, whatever word you want to use, between your fingers. Not really do anything but smearing really here. Just smear it. And you kind of flatten out the butter and you get the flour worked into it. You do pie dough the same way, and when those little pieces of butter, cold butter, hit that hot 450-degree oven, then that will make those biscuits fluff up and make them really tender. If you overwork biscuit dough, pie dough, scones, any of that, they won't be as flaky and tender. You have to really be gentle with them. You don't want to overmix them. You don't want to do too much. Get that butter kind of smeared in there, flattened out. You want each piece kind of flattened out where it's coated in the flour, and that's kind of the dough. And then we're going to add our buttermilk and our sourdough that we mixed up. And then we're going to do very little mixing. I'm going to show you. It'll look like a crumbling mess, a shaggy mess, whatever you call it. But it's going to make flaky biscuits, and I'll show you how to pull it together. I've got a piece of parchment paper here, and I like to use the parchment. 1, it keeps my counter clean, cleaning up all the mess. But 2, I'm going to show you how I use it to fold over my dough. I fold this over 3 or 4 times, just like I do my pie dough. If you've seen those recipes, you kind of know what I'm talking about, but I'll show you what I'm talking about. So just get that butter mashed down there. There's still going to be little pieces, and you want that. But you want that butter incorporated with the flour. Smear, just smear. All you gotta do is smear it with hands. Okay, this feels pretty good actually. I think it's gonna be ready to go here. Your hand's a little messy, but it's okay. It's all good. We're gonna put in our buttermilk and our sourdough. Sourdough needs to be mixed in there, part of it. And we'll take a fork and we'll just gently start mixing, just gently. It's going to be shaggy. It's going to be shaggy. It's not going to form a dough just yet. You'll think it's just a shaggy mess. It's not going to work if you've never done it. But it does work, and it makes them flaky. Like I said, scones, pie dough, any of that, you really need to use this method to get a really good flaky biscuit every time. And then just don't overwork it. You don't want to be You want to be as gentle with this as you can be. I'm actually going to use my scraper. You could use the spatula if you don't have one of these. But this really helps. Scrape it down to the sides and kind of mix it in there. It's that liquid. You just want the liquid mixed in with the flour. And that's all you're wanting at this point. So I'm just folding that up with my little scraper. I like this little scraper. They're like $3. Yep. I had to order it online, but I was ordering some other stuff. But if you never get one, if you make bread, biscuits, scones, any of that, pie dough, this thing is amazing. It really does a good job. Cleans the side of your bowl down, which you also want. This is wet. Should be that way. Do not add more flour. Do not. You will make a dry biscuit. You don't want that. It has to be a wet dough. So don't get worried about it. Looks pretty good right there. Now what we're going to do, again, it's a shaggy mess. It's the way it should be. It's perfect. It's what you want. What a shaggy mess. Then we're going to put this on parchment and we're going to do our folds. And I'll show you a couple ways to fold it. I like to use the parchment, but you don't have to have the parchment. You can do it on your counter. You just want, that's where you can put just a tiny bit of flour. And I'm talking the dusting. This is probably a little more than I might use for some things, but it's not very much. So we're going to get this shaggy wet dough out of here. Turn it out. This really cleans your bowl down and just helps you handle wet doughs and stuff. It's a good thing to have. But again, you could use a spatula and you could do it with your hands. Just get all of that out of there. It's wet and it's going to want to stick to the bowl. But it's okay. Get all the flour out. You can scrape that bowl down pretty clean with this scraper. Now, what we're going to do, you can take this dough and you can fold it over with a spatula or even with your hand. It's kind of hard to do with your hand. If you do it with your hands, just get them wet in water, not really wet, just dip them wet and kind of shake it off. But wet hands will help you work with the sticky dough too, whether it's bread or biscuits or whatever. But I think I can do it without wetting my hands. We'll see. I believe with my scraper I can. But wetting your hands does not hurt anything. You're not going to get the dough wet. You don't get it that wet. You just kind of pull that up. You can mash it out. I think I will get my hands just a tiny bit wet. Just wet them off. Wet them down and then just shake it off. That way I can pat this down better. You can take this and you just fold it. What you want, that's what makes flaky biscuits, flaky pie dough. You don't want to knead, but you just fold. Fold that wet, shaggy mess. That's why I like the parchment. You can do it this way. You want to fold it 3 or 4 times. But you can also do this with your parchment. I'll show you that. My hands come down here a little bit. Okay, you can take your parchment and fold it. Just gently press it down. Take it and fold it. Gently press it down. That's going to make those flaky layers. Take it, fold it this way. One each direction is what I like to do. And then that should be enough. You don't need much more. You just mash it down there. Now what you're looking for here is something you can pat out. It's going to still be sticky. I'll wet my hands down probably here. And I am going to sprinkle just a tad, and I'm talking a tad of flour. You just don't want to overdo it. People put too much flour on their dough. Then it just makes kind of a raw taste in your biscuits, and they're going to be too floury. But you don't want it sticking all over the place either, like this is doing. So we're going to have to add a little bit of flour in there. We won't get those biscuits off the counter, so we're going to have to add a little bit. Just keep it light. You can tell when you've got enough under there. The parchment's not quite big enough. Because it will quit sticking when you do. You can stick that. And see, I see a little piece of butter in there. It's perfect. That's what you want. You want to see those. Little bit of flour in there. Just so the dough won't stick. When we roll it, when we cut our biscuits, we want to be able to get them off the counter, obviously. Off the paper. So now, I'm going to take this dough, move it more to the center. Sleeves are kind of falling down in it. And I'm going to take my scraper again, make sure that's not going to stick. Now that looks pretty good. Ooh, right there. Sprinkle it. Then we're going to pass this out. And I'm going to put my seam side on the bottom. It's easier, they will split open that way. Get the dough off my hands a little bit. Obviously, you want clean hands when you start. That's a given. When you're cooking, you always have clean hands. You should have. And I like these to be about 1 inch thick. And I'm going to make square biscuits. Now, you can make round ones. You can cut them out with a round cutter. But every time you do that, and I do it sometimes, then you have scraps of dough and you got to reshape them and da-da-da-da-da. Or if I just do a square, I can just cut them. I don't have any scraps to mess with. I like square biscuits. They're good for sandwiches. If you do like a chicken sandwich or some kind of a sandwich, a square biscuit's pretty good. So you want to make this into a square, and I'm going to cut it in about 9 pieces. Again, about I don't know, up to your fingernail thick, where that finger starts there, about that thick. Okay, I'll take my metal midge scraper and cut these. Kind of line it up pretty even. That way things, when they're even, I even use a scale a lot of times when I'm doing bread. But rows, because if you use a scale, then all the biscuits will be the same size. And they'll bake the same way, or all your rows. These, I can eyeball it. If I'm doing rows, I would probably want to use the scale most of the time. Makes it easier. Okay, move those out of the way. Now I have a pan, ironed flat kind of pizza pan. If you don't have that, you can use a cast iron skillet. Just grease it. I used avocado oil because olive oil tends to burn too much. Or you can use just a cookie sheet, a sheet pan. Just grease it. Put parchment. I'd probably put parchment on that. I don't need to with this. I'm going to cut these in a third and a third and a third. Just eyeball it here. So there's 2 of those. Then I'm going to cut 3 this way, so we'll have 3, 6, 9 biscuits. I'm going to cut twice, but it's going to make 9 biscuits. Eyeball them there. And I can see that some are just a little bigger than the others. I'll kind of square this one up. Maybe more oblong biscuit there, but that's okay. They're all good. You can make them a little square. You can leave them a little odd shaped. I like to kind of square them up, get them again about the same size. Flatten them until they're kind of the same. Just take your little scraper in your hand and flatten them out. There's your biscuits. We're going to bake them in 450 until they're just golden brown. I like to check them in 10 minutes. Sometimes I'll take a 15, 12 to 15. Just, you know, every oven's different. Everybody's oven is going to be different. But I think you're going to like these biscuits. If you can't eat regular wheat because of the gluten problems, again, these have gluten, but it's much easier to digest. I don't do too well with a lot of modern wheat. I can eat it some, but I can't eat much of it. So, and there's so many ways with these ancient grains, since you can make all-purpose out of them, or you can use some of the whole grain, which I like to do for the nutrition. I really, really do. I didn't know these. They said I'm going to show you this method, but I'll show you how to make them with some whole grain too, because then you're getting your body more of the nutrition it needs. These have some nutrition because the Einkorn, you know, there's 26 or so or more nutrients in it, and it was high extraction Einkorn, so it's still got 80% of the nutrition in it. That's a big biscuit there. You just have to watch them. This one's going to cook faster than that one, obviously. I might take the smaller ones out first. This is where scale comes in. The scale would make this more precise, for sure. There's some big biscuits there. Some smaller biscuits too. That. Or they're good with just butter and jelly and honey or something like that too. You can use sugar-free jelly, or you can use, I like apple butter, I like honey. put that on the bottom, the little part I added. There's our biscuits. Don't they look good? We're going to bake these in a 450 oven, like I said, 12-15 minutes, then I'll be back. The oven, and they just smell amazing. They are so flaky. If you can see that, they are just amazing. Flaky, tender. I'll get it around there so you can see it better. They rise up. Ancient grains just have the most amazing taste. All-purpose flour, I do use it. I buy the organic when I do, or I grind my own. I use my own wheat to grind too and sift down as I need it. But I have bought organic, and I buy organic grains. But anyway, there's nothing like the flavor of some whole wheat added to your more all-purpose, or adding some ancient grains. Since this has the spelt and the quinoa, I'm going to pull this back so you can see it better. The spelt doesn't have quinoa, has spelt and einkorn. So we know I already know it's good. You can see I've already tried one. But they are just delicious. I'm going to cut one open for you and show you the inside. They're just so tender and so good. I baked them 12 minutes. I checked them in 12 minutes. Then I left them in another minute or two. I took out the 2 smaller ones and baked the others another minute. You just want them golden brown. But I cut one open because I always like to cut one open just to make sure that inside is good and done. Plus I like to taste it. That is one flaky, delicious biscuit. Flaky. Soft, tender on the inside. The crust on the outside, which I love. Just wonderful. And the smell, like I said, and the taste. You cannot beat spelt and einkorn for flavor and taste. When I do sourdough bread, a lot of times I like to make it with spelt, with ancient grains. I just love cooking with ancient grains. Even when I do half whole grain, I usually will go up to 50% whole grain. You know, we'll do those biscuits for you. They're going to be a little denser, but they're still good. Still tender. If you go beyond 50%, you're going to get a pretty much drier product. You say, well, why go 50%? Because you put 50% back of 26 to 30 nutrients in there. And that's nutrition. I mean, just think of how many vitamin pills you've got to take to get all that. These have zinc. They have all those good things in them that we need in our bodies. Magnesium, calcium, potassium, all the things that, you know, that nutritionists tell us we need, and we know we're missing them. We're not getting enough in our food. This is a really good way to get some of it back in. I don't need biscuits every day, but once in a while, when I have one, it's going to be an ancient grain one most of the time. And I like the buttermilk in the biscuits. So I will, unlike, this is half one with some butter and honey on it. I love ancient grains. If you like them, you need to try these biscuits and let me know what you think. And we will see you on the next show. Enjoy.